Hey guys, Mr. O here. I have Daily Geography Week 5. If you look at this, it is map coordinates, and we're using Australia to help determine map coordinates. Now, if you look at this, a lot of this is going to be review. This is a grid, and of course, we use grids for absolute location. So let's talk about that for just a second. Most people, when we're talking about location, we're talking about relative location. I live over kind of close to Severance Middle School, or I live over off of Main Street in Windsor, or something like that. That's relative. It's kind of comparing where it is to something else. What a map coordinate map allows us to do, or a grid allows us to do, is get absolute location. Like, I absolutely know where it is. It's very specific, and I can use coordinates. So that's why we use a grid, is to find absolute location. So that will help you with one of the questions this week. Now, we are using Australia, and I want you to notice that we do have lines of latitude, and of course they go from east to west, but I also want you to notice two things. One, there are 10 degrees in between each line. Also note that they are all labeled S, and that's because Australia is in the southern hemisphere, or south of the equator. So first thing we establish is what's going on our map, and we can see that there's 10 degrees in between each, and that they are all labeled south for lines of latitude. If we do the same for longitude, we can see that the lines of longitude are going north-south as always, and we can see that there's also 10 degrees in between each of the lines of longitude. These are labeled E for east because we have Australia to the east of the prime meridian. It's in the eastern hemisphere. So that gives us an idea of kind of where we're starting from. Let's take a look at Brisbane for just a second. And Brisbane is located right here. We can see that it is in between coordinates of 20 degrees south and 30 degrees south, lines of latitude, I should say, not coordinates. So it's in between both of those. But I also noticed that it's closer to 30. And so my position on here, or my location on there, should be maybe a 27, 28, something like that, 27 or 28 degrees south latitude for Brisbane. Another thing I notice sometimes that students will mistake is they don't look at what kind of order these are going in. This is going from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40. So it's getting bigger as we go down the map, and that's important to note too. So we're probably 27, 28 degrees south latitude for Brisbane. If we look at the longitude, it's on this side of 150, and I can see that it's going 120, 130, 140, 150. So my number has to be bigger than 150. I don't have a 160 over here, so I'll have to kind of guess. It looks like maybe it's not quite half. So I'm thinking 153, 154 degrees east. And so my coordinates would be about 28 or 27 degrees south latitude and about 153 degrees east longitude. So that's kind of how we're going to do this. All right, let's look at Mondays, number 1 and number 2. Name two names that are given for lines that run around the Earth in east-west. Well, we've already talked about the lines that go east to west are these, and so what do we call those lines? Those are the ones we're talking about. Number 2 for Monday, what 2 lines are given for lines that run north-south? Well, these are the lines running north-south. What are they called? Give 2 names. Remember, don't turn in a piece of paper that has one answer for Monday, number 1 and number 2, because they both require 2. Number 1 on Tuesday, the map of Australia is shown on a geographic grid. What does that mean? Well, grids mean that we have lines of latitude and lines of longitude forming squares, and they help us to determine absolute location. So however you can kind of word that so it makes sense to you, something about squares, something about lines, and something about absolute location works for that. Tuesday, number 2, is it possible to find coordinates on the map of Australia? Why or why not? So we've spent the first part of this video using coordinates. So of course the answer has to be yes. And why or why not? Well, put something down for how we used them, or how we knew that we could get coordinates. It has to do with numbers, and that's most of the answer anyway. So Tuesday, number 2 shouldn't be too tough for you. Wednesday, number 1, which states of Australia have land area along the latitude of line 30 degrees south? Well, Couple things to note. We need to figure out which states, what the states are, and you can see these kind of dotted lines. Those make up the state. So this would be one state. This would be a second state. This would be another state. The question asks 30 degrees south. So if we're moving along 30 degrees south, which states does 30 degrees south go through? So your hint's going to be that you should have 3 answers for Wednesday number 1. Wednesday number 2, which state in Australia would include the coordinates 43 degrees south latitude and 148 degrees east longitude? So if I'm looking for 43 south, well, here's 40, so I have to determine is 43 going to be above or below it, and I can see that my numbers are going from 20, 30 to 40, so it's got to be below it, so I'm somewhere around there. And then 148 longitude, well, here's 150, so I have to decide whether it's going to be on this line, this side of the line, or that side of the line, and it's going 130, 140, 150, so it's going to be on this side. So someplace around here, remember my latitude was right there, so I'm going to be someplace close to here, and it says what state is this, and there's one labeled right there, it's Tasmania. So there you go, that's how you figure that out. Thursday number 1, what is the capital of the Northern Territory and estimate its coordinates? So we have to locate the Northern Territory, and I can figure out the Northern Territory by these dotted lines. I know from my legend that a state capital has the darkened star. I can see a darkened star right there. So now all I have to do is figure out the latitude and longitude of the capital, which is Darwin, and I'll let you go ahead and do that. Number 2, what is the name of Australia's national capital and estimate its coordinates? So this for Thursday number 2, we're going to do it the same way, and we're going to find the legend has the national capital right there. We can see the national capital right there, so give me the name and then figure out what the latitude and longitude is. I want you to know it's not on the 150 line. It's very close, but don't put 150 as your answer because it's not on that line. Friday number 1, which sea includes the coordinates 10 degrees south and 130 degrees east? And do the coordinates show the relative or absolute location of the sea? So first off, we need to just find those 2 coordinates. You can figure out that here's 10, 130 is about right there. This should be pretty easy. It's in both of those, it's right on both of those lines. And it's asking for the second part, is this relative or absolute? Well, this is kind of a tricky question because the sea is obviously bigger than just that one spot. But because it gave you coordinates, specifically 10 degrees south and 130 degrees east, it has to be the answer of absolute. For that point, it has to be absolute. The sea's bigger than that, but for that portion of the sea, it's absolute because you have coordinates. And then number 2, why are all the lines of latitude labeled S and all the lines labeled E? Well, we covered that at the start of the video. So make sure you cover both of those answers on Friday number 2. Hope this helps. Please let me know if I can answer anything in the comments below, and thanks for watching.